Final Fantasy VII. Now, this game was released in 1997 for the PlayStation 1. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most critically acclaimed and fondly remembered games, not only of the 32-bit era, but as video games as a whole. Now, this was Final Fantasy's first iteration on a non-Nintendo platform. Previously, the Final Fantasy series was on the Super Nintendo and the NES. Now, when Nintendo for the Nintendo 64 announced that they would still be using cartridges, Square realized that there's no way that they could put this game onto a cartridge. This game is 3 discs on the PlayStation. Believe it or not, Final Fantasy VII did, I believe, begin prototype development on the Nintendo 64, but they had to switch it over. And a CD, if this is 3 CDs, and each CD holds about 700 megabytes, whereas a cartridge only holds, I think, about 64 megabytes. There's no way this game was reaching the cartridge, so they switched over to Sony, and the series has never been the same since. Now, in Final Fantasy VII, you take the role of Cloud Strife, a member of the Avalanche team, who they all hope to stop the evil Shinra Corporation, and more importantly, stop the game's antagonist and anti-hero, Sephiroth, from becoming god over the world, in order to follow over the footsteps of what is declared as its mother in the game, who is basically a super life form. Now, Cloud is joined in the game by characters such as Barret, Tifa, and Aerith in his quest. Also, the game has appearances by Final Fantasy recurring characters Cid, Yuffie, and Vincent, who many of you may also know from the Kingdom Hearts series. Cloud in the game, he's very like an interesting character because he goes through an identity crisis throughout the game you find out his memories have been altered and they're not exactly what he remembers. With that being said, Sephiroth becomes a very hard character to dislike towards the end of the game because his quest for vengeance all begins due to him being manipulated as a soldier in Shinra's military corporation, which is called Soldier, go figure, into believing he was something other than what he was, and finding out the truth is kind of what put him on this tirade to take over the world. Now, that's the part of the game in a nutshell. But in 2017, how does this game hold up? Well, I played this game for the first time in my life in 2016, and it was very easy to see why everyone's been raving about this game for years. The story of the game is amazing. From the moment the game starts, it's a very action-filled game that never lets up on any interesting plot points and side quests. The only area that bothered me a little bit due to its repetitiveness was the casino, due to having to find your way through the portals and could be getting sent back to like the beginning of the portals. However, when I started this game, I couldn't put it down. Naturally, the graphics in this game look really dated, at least on a modern TV, which I know isn't the preferred way to play classic games. But right now, it's all I have. And it showed a lot of jaggies. However, if you can get past graphical standpoints and a lot of old school FMV video, which was popular at the time, this game still shines. Now, the music in this game is still beautiful and a blast to listen to. Even being included as a radio station in Final Fantasy 15, when playing 15, I found myself always putting on the Final Fantasy 7 station. The game has some of probably the most captivating music in any RPG, and the songs play at the right moment, and they fit the mood of the game as to like what's going on at the time, so it all kind of works out great. Combat in the game is a turn-based combat system. However, during the game, you have a limit meter which builds up after completing your turns, and once that meter is full, the characters can unlock or unleash essentially what are super powerful finishing moves. Now, during the game, by completing different tasks specific to each character, players can unlock stronger limit break moves for each character, which in turn is totally recommended, especially when facing the super bosses. Now, that brings me to the super bosses. In the game, there are 3 super bosses: Emerald, Ruby, and Ultimate Weapon, which they're completely optional bosses, and essentially they are super high-powered dragons, which can only be fought after certain criteria has been met, and these bosses are hard as all hell. I recommend you definitely know what you're doing going into these battles. I know I personally never beat, I think, one of them, which you have to fight the battle in a certain way for it to work in your favor. If you don't know what you're doing, or if you're completely underleveled going into these boss fights, you will die. And you will die very quickly. So before going into these, make sure you know what you're doing. Now, in 2017, over 20 years after its launch, is Final Fantasy VII worth playing for the first time now? I mean, yeah. This game has a huge following, and there's a reason behind it. Final Fantasy VII will keep you sucked in for hours on end, and once the story begins and you start getting engulfed into that, it's a huge world to explore. As I mentioned, spanning 3 discs, there is no shortage of content in this game. With the remake coming out soon, according to Square Enix, but it's also been coming out kind of soon since it was announced 2 years ago. For newer generation consoles, I would definitely suggest, if you can, pick up the original and play the game. Because you don't know how the remake's going to come out, what they're going to change, and it could be a whole different experience. This game right now is quite affordable, going for around $30 complete in box. That's Final Fantasy for the PlayStation 1, guys. Tell me your fondness of this game in the comments below, what you think of Final Fantasy VII, or any other RPGs, or Final Fantasy games in the series. What do you think the remake's going to consist of? How do you think the remake's going to stand up? Like my channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below. As always, guys, go check out Final Fantasy VII. You guys have a great day.